All right, guys, as you're getting settled in, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm glad to be back with you all after missing a couple weeks, traveling, seeing family. Really thankful for Jack being able to step in and do such an awesome job. Watch those lessons online, and really a great addition to this series that we've been doing. So really appreciate Jack doing that for me. So today, I want to say what a great lesson we had this morning. It's one of those lessons I almost wish I just kind of threw out my class today. We just spent more time discussing and kind of marinating on that awesome lesson. Really awesome. So it's a great day to be here for sure. That being said, I'm never upset whenever a great lesson goes long, but I have less time today. So I probably won't get through all my material today, which is fine, because I think this will be a good lesson for us to kind of spread out and go into for maybe a couple weeks. So today I want to talk about a story. It's going to be in Genesis chapter 37. It's the story of Joseph. When I was a kid, doing Bible Bowl and just learning those Old Testament stories, this is one of those stories that I knew really well. But this first part that we're going to be talking about today is one that I would pretty much skip over. I knew it, but it didn't seem important to me. It really just kind of set up for the really important stuff. The awesome things that were to come from Joseph's story that many of us are familiar with. But as I've gone back and kind of looked at it more, there's some things that really stand out to me that I think they're worthwhile to touch on and to bring out for us today. So that's what we're going to do today. Excuse me. So we're going to start out, I'm going to read just the first 10 verses of Genesis chapter 37. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report for them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. Verse 6, he said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his brother and his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept this saying in mind. So here we first get a little bit of an insight into Joseph and his character. And what we learn is maybe Joseph is a goody two-shoes, right? Which I looked up that phrase, goody two-shoes. Does anyone know where that came from? I looked it up and it still didn't really make sense. It's from some story, but I didn't want to read the story, but I was just curious when you had the too long didn't read version. Anyways, Joseph was a goody two-shoes, right? He was a really upright individual. He's someone who followed the rules. And a lot of times in our society, we'd also call him a tattletale. Some would call him a snitch, right? But the truth is, Joseph was doing his job. He was going and he saw his brothers. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do, tending to the flocks the way they were supposed to. And instead of Joseph, telling them, "This is what you guys need to do, straighten up," he went and he told his father for his father to handle it, right? So we see Joseph is someone who really follows rules, and he's very upright. Next, in this passage, we see that Joseph was the favorite, right? That's interesting to me. I wanted to ask you all who have kids, did you have favorites? Do you have a favorite? Are you willing to raise your hand and tell me you have a favorite?
I have one that I let sleep as long as they want to sleep.
Okay. Okay.
My favorites change depending on situation.
Okay. So it's a mood-based favorite.
Becky keeps on saying that I have a favorite.
Oh, interesting.
We have a favorite, we have one.
Okay, that's fair, yeah. I am curious, though, if that really is a thing where you do have a favorite. Maybe they're easier, maybe they have different reasons. We see in here, there's a reason that Joseph was a favorite, right? And it's this child meant something. I said Joseph, Jacob. This meant something to Jacob. Joseph had a special place in his heart. And Joseph was also a really good kid, it sounds like, at 17 years old. Now, in this passage, we also see Joseph is telling these people he's been having these dreams. And why did Joseph have to tell his brothers these dreams? I don't know. I don't know if he was just compelled to do it. I'm not sure. But if you were the brothers and you're in this situation and you see that Joseph he's the goody two-shoes. He's the one who's going to follow the rules, do the right thing. And then he's telling you, hey, I had this dream. Let me tell you, I'm the best. That's kind of how they took it, right? And they're already seeing Joseph was the favorite. Basically, we see this culmination of building resentment, envy, and even the start of hate building in this family. Now, I'm sure if you have siblings, if you have kids, you know that family fight, right? They butt heads, they argue, and sometimes it's a phase of life, right? It's something that, it just happens. I had a sister, and there was one point in our life where we couldn't stand each other. Oh, we couldn't be in the same room. And it was in part due to the time that we were put together. We were so close in age, and there was a lot going on. We grew out of that. That's someone I'm really close to and I really care about. And it's hard for me to think about what mind state I was in at that time that we were so it was rough. But this is something more than that, right? There's a real building here that it's very serious. And I'm not sure if Joseph's fully aware. I'm not sure if he was picking up on the clues, but it says the brothers couldn't speak peacefully to him. They didn't have nice things to say. It was a really rough relationship. All right. Any thoughts on that passage before we continue on? Yes?
I think we see the impact of generational favoritism. Jacob and Esau experienced the same thing with Isaac. And it creates a tension. And any kind of favoritism and biased behavior is always going to create some kind of fight. And you can see how that can take on a generational nature. And it doesn't get better unless it changes in children becoming parents themselves.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, looking kind of big picture, there's more than just this one story. There's generational favoritism that was at play. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because when I asked, if you have favorites, no one was like, John's my favorite. Sally, oh man, hands above everyone else. But maybe they were your favorite, but you didn't want to express that. If your kids ask who's your favorite, you're not going to tell them that. There's a reason, right? Because even if that's the case, there is an impact. There is tension there. And, the truth is, kids, they're going to tell you, you love them more, you let them get away with more, they're always your favorite. But a parent's job is to balance that and still parent in a way that favoritism doesn't take over and create these tensions. Yeah, great thoughts. Let's go ahead. I still think it's important to read these passages. So let's read starting verse 12, and we'll just go through. So Genesis 37, verse 12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers, with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him to the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then he will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. That way he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming into Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not into the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brother and said, "The boy is gone, and I? Where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Okay, so big section that we just read, but let's break it down a little bit on what we saw. So we see Joseph coming to check on his brothers, just walking up. This is kind of the routine. They know what's going on. And the brothers see him from afar, and like we saw in the beginning passage, things have been building. Nothing was, resolved. It just been building up inside. And it got to the point that they said, "Let's kill him. Let's kill our brother." And we know this isn't just a couple brothers. They had a big family, right? It's a whole group of brothers, and they were in agreement. They're like, "Yeah, that's what we got to do. It's time." That way, he's not going to talk about his dreams anymore. There's no more, "Oh, Joseph's the best. We will end this right here, right now." Now, verse 21, Reuben, he kind of has this plan. Yes, they're all in agreement that we got to get rid of him, but Reuben's like, "No, let's do something else." He pretends to be on board with this plan. Now, this is really interesting because Reuben is the oldest child, right? If anyone has a reason to be jealous of Joseph and to be envious and worry about Joseph, it's Reuben. Why is that? He's the firstborn. And what does the firstborn mean at this time?
The father, whatever the father has, goes to the firstborn. So he can be not given, could be given, and everything that he was promised as being a firstborn.
Sure, yeah. Reuben's in line to get all these things, these blessings, the things that are supposed to be passed down. And he's seeing that Joseph's being treated, almost like a firstborn would be treated. Doted upon, given things, cared for. And so if anyone's supposed to be really like, what is going on with Joseph? No. It should be Reuben. And I find it interesting that he's the one standing up. That says a lot about his character.
Brian?
Yes?
I think it's significant that what the brothers, at least what's expressed in the text, their problem that they call out is about his dreams. And it's not that he had them, it would appear, it's because he was mouthing off about it, right? So they don't seem to, maybe it was because of favoritism that his father was showing him, but at least what's brought out is he's been running off at the mouth with his brothers. Meanwhile, what should have his brothers been doing for him? Should they not have been caring for their brothers? Like, is he not? It's that thing, am I my brother's keeper? They are.
Right.
They should have been teaching him. They should have been training him, but they didn't. And probably, in their minds, they were right because he was a brat.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they didn't. And Reuben at least appears to have some sort of conscience of that.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. They had an interpretation of this dream that Joseph gave them. And that dream, that interpretation was threatening to them and what they had planned and what they saw. And there was no empathy at that point because they were so focused on what that dream meant for them. Right? That's a great point. Verse 26 and verse 27, Judah is so thoughtful with his decision to sell Joseph instead of killing him. Instead of, killing him, he's our brother after all. Let's just leave him here and let him starve. And maybe we can sell him instead, actually. That's so thoughtful. The way they put that in the Bible, it cracks me up that was actually something that was a rationale that he had. And I think in that moment, he actually really believed that. Because when you're at that stage of passion and anger, you're not thinking rationally. You're at a different place, a different stage, where logic, it looks different. We look at this and say, that's ridiculous. But in that time, you know what? Let's be nice. He's our brother. Let's not kill him and murder him and put blood on our hands. Let's just do it a little more peacefully. It's the least we could do. That level of passion, it shows the level of passion that would play for them to think that was less, the easier path or the better path in that situation. The truth is, though, we see that the plan that Reuben had placed and tried out it was foiled. It didn't work. His plan was ruined. But it's interesting because his plan was ruined so that God's plan could continue. And I think that's really cool. Reuben he played a part in this by, talking them down from straight up, let's kill him right now. But then God's plan was still, I'm going to take it from here. I'm going to do the rest. I think that's so cool. What would you do if your family plotted to kill you, placed you in a pit, and then sold you into a life of slavery? Many of you can't put yourself in that place to think like that, right? The truth is, Joseph was placed there. And I want you to imagine, I want you to do the impossible right now. I want you to imagine that you don't know the rest of Joseph's story. You don't know what's coming for him. This is the first time you're hearing about it. Joseph has been placed in the pit, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery. If you're reading this like a novel, like a book, and you close it and you think about it, what do you imagine is going to become of Joseph?
He won't survive.
He won't survive.
The depression will overtake him, and the trouble of being a slave. He won't believe. He'll lose all
lose hope, won't believe.
You look at it as one of the movies you see that somebody when betrayed, they become angry or they become a monster and the monster thing. That's kind of what you would happen.
Yeah. Just knowing everything that happened, the anger, the inner passion that would take over, and the revenge would be on the mind. That would be a motivation. I agree.
Am I missing something? But anywhere in here, did Joseph ever make any comments about what was going on?
What was going on with his brothers and
Yeah, the interaction there. He never once pushed back. So, what?
He's in a hole. They have a bunch of holes around that part of the country. They put him down one of the holes.
But there's never a spoken word as to any pushback that he ever, anything, nothing he ever said.
no complaining about how the brothers were treating him, saying mean things. There was none of that from Joseph.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So, is it possible that he, maybe not consciously, but felt God working in his life?
I believe that's a strong possibility.
I would think that might be a thought that he had from his dreams. I mean, if I were the brothers, I mean, I'm a kid of 7, and if I heard that kind of talk from one of them, they'd be bragging, because I got something better than you got. But I don't get that impression of what he was. So I just kind of wonder if he didn't feel God with him.
I absolutely believe that's the case. Yeah. And I think that's a great point. That why didn't he speak out and say these things?
And he really didn't.
That we know of. Yeah.
Right.
Right. I'm sure Joseph said more words than what's written here, but
That's probably true, but there's never any hint of him actually pushing back.
retaliating.
He didn't want to be in prison, and he asked, for help, and it didn't come right away. But he got himself busy being the person leading the others.
Yep.
And so he always was working up.
Right. Yeah. Great thought. Right behind you. Sorry.
I feel like that he was the youngest son. He was taken in by the father. He got the coat of many colors. He really didn't really see anything wrong. I mean, he felt like, well, this is okay, I'm all right.
You feel like maybe he just kind of.
He just accepted it. He was still a young boy, but he just accepted it as his right. And that's why he told the dreams. He just thought that they would be excited about it.
He thought that's the way it goes, and he didn't know, maybe the impact of telling that dream. Possibly, could be. Yes, you had a thought?
Yeah, I was going to mention 2 things. One, I'm listening to how we're synthesizing the story, and I mean, not surprisingly, we're synthesizing it out of a modern and more than that, a Western mind, right? And the author here, as much as we want it to just be this story that we're sort of zoomed in on, if the Holy Spirit is the author, he's got something in mind that he's trying to get across, right? So why would Joseph have not had much to say, right? In this day and time, the Israelites had been taught pretty clearly that at the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every matter is established. In this case, it's 10-1, right? So what is he going to have? Even if he actually is saying something, like he's going. And then what's he going to do? And if I were going to try to extrapolate a lesson from sort of the immediacy of the context, are we ever caught in a situation where things aren't going the way that in our minds they ought to go? And we can scream and yell and pound, our fists on the table or the sand or whatever, and how's that going to change it? It's not. You're going along, now what? Because who's really driving? We don't learn that, like, definitively until we get to the end of Genesis,
Right.
where Joseph makes the comment, you meant evil against me and God meant it for good. Who's really driving?
Yeah.
So maybe that's useful.
Yeah. Excellent point. Thank you for bringing that out.
In chapter 42, verse 21, his brothers were in hot water with the head, Joseph, who was the head of them all. And they said to each other, "Truly we are guilty concerning our brother because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, yet we would not listen. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. So Joseph must have been begging, don't do this, and, trying to convince them, to change their minds.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't have any of it. So it wasn't exactly like he was a sheep. The sheep would be, led to be sheared or
Yeah.
he was overwhelmed and he had no choice. But then he chose to make the best of the situation he could change.
Yes.
Trusted in God to work things out.
Joseph was human. And we see that right there where a normal person, if your brothers are taking you, throwing you a pit, going to do this stuff, you're not going to be like, oh, okay. And you just get in the pit and you're like, here I go. God's got me though. There's going to be, that's terrifying. That's traumatic. That's scary. And Joseph was human. And thank you for bringing that up, that he did beg. And there was things. Yes.
And even to Jack's point, another verse down, Reuben's like, I told you we shouldn't have done that. Now we're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And again, human, right? Very human in the situation. So
yeah. So I wanted you to think about if we didn't know the future, because I think, like Rex was saying, you got to think, how could Joseph possibly do anything with his life from here? How could he muster the willpower to keep moving forward and doing these things, even if let's say he did, believe in God beforehand and was really, God's got me. Come on. Your family betrayed you. They wanted to kill you. You were sold into slavery. You won't, in your mind, you're not going to be able to come home. This is now your life. And at 17 years old, to be doted on, loved on, to now, that's gone. You're not getting that back. I hate to do a cliffhanger because I wanted to really get through more, but I really wanted to focus on how he was able to deal with that trauma, how he was able to push through. And I wanted to really get into some specifics on how we can take what Joseph did and what we can do as well. I'm talking, what were the protective factors that Joseph had in his life that allowed him to bounce back, to have the resiliency to not fall into the easy trap of wanting the revenge, of feeling I'm a victim and I can't do anything and my life is out of my control. How could he possibly do that in this circumstance? Well, we're going to see that, and we're going to see more of that, and I want to get into the specifics because it's really, really important for us to know what are the things that we need to put in our life, the protective factors that we need to add to our life, the things that we need to tap into that Joseph was tapping into, that the Bible has laid out and said, listen, these are some coping skills, and if you get this, oh man, you got the best power source. You got a God of peace that passes all understanding. So I really want to dive into that more with you next week. So I hope you come back so we can really give this a good rest of the conclusion that it needs. So any thoughts before we end?
Just add a different element with regards to the brothers. We talked about generational favoritism. We also see the impact of family secrets and the toll that can take on preserving a lie for decades on end. And I think we see that in families and the toll and the impact that can take. And so recognizing that just because we try to do our best to cover up a sin, we see the levels and the degrees that it has to take on many of their lives. I think even to the degree of even Judah in the secrecy with Tamar. It has a toll, and I think we can really learn what to avoid in our own lives with regards to sin and our families.
Absolutely. This is a story where we're focusing a little bit on Joseph, but the family aspect, the consequences it played in the things that it took to continue covering up internally and the physical tolls as well. Oh, it's real. It's a true testament to the human experience. And great point. Thank you. All right, let's end in a prayer, guys. Dear Heavenly Father, so blessed to be here today, to take in the words that give us life, to take in the things that can continue to help us move forward and set our life in the path that we know you are guiding for us. Lord, help us to look for you in ways that we haven't been, and just acknowledge the places that you've taken us and where you can bring us to. Keep us safe as we go from this place, and help us to continue to love others and love ourselves more as well. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.